Have you ever done something you thought you could hide forever? Something you knew wasn't right, but you convinced yourself it wasn't that big of a deal? Well, that's exactly how it started for me. Little did I know crossing that line just once would lead to something I could never undo. This is the story of how I crossed the line 5 times, and my husband still doesn't know. It all began with a simple, innocent choice. At least that's what I told myself. I wasn't planning on doing anything wrong. It wasn't like I woke up one morning with the intention to hurt anyone. But sometimes life doesn't give you a warning. Sometimes you step into something without realizing the consequences until it's too late. I wasn't looking for trouble, but looking back, I can see how easily I allowed myself to slip. The first time was almost like a blur. It was one of those moments where you know you're not doing the right thing, but you tell yourself, it's not that big of a deal. No one will ever find out. I didn't even feel guilty at first. It felt almost like I was doing it for myself, a secret little indulgence I could escape to when the world felt too heavy. Everything seemed fine on the surface. I kept up appearances. I smiled when I needed to smile, laughed when I needed to laugh. But inside, something began to shift. The guilt, however small, was there. It was like a whisper that grew louder with every passing day. The worst part, I could look at my husband, see him being kind, trusting me, and I felt the weight of what I was doing. But it didn't stop me. At first, I told myself that I could handle it. I told myself that this wouldn't change anything, that it was just a mistake, and mistakes didn't define me. But the truth is, that first time set a dangerous pattern. The longer I ignored the growing discomfort, the more it ate away at me. The guilt never went away, it just buried itself deeper. Yet, despite all that, I couldn't stop. I didn't know then that what seemed like a harmless action would soon be the first of many steps into a place I never wanted to go. I didn't realize how the lie would grow, how each time I crossed that line would feel both lighter and heavier at once. It was like I was teetering on the edge, convincing myself that I wasn't falling, just leaning. That was the first time. It was just a moment, a choice, a misstep. But as much as I wanted to convince myself it didn't matter, I knew it was the beginning of something much bigger, something I wasn't sure I could fix. But I didn't stop, and that in itself was the problem. The second time felt different. By now the guilt wasn't so easy to ignore. It weighed on me every day, lingering in the background like a shadow I couldn't shake off. But then something shifted. The sense of control, the feeling of being in charge of my own actions began to cloud my judgment. I wasn't just crossing a line anymore. I was choosing to cross it again. I remember telling myself that this time would be different, that I had learned from the first mistake. I thought maybe I could handle it. The first time I had been caught off guard, a little surprised at how easily I let myself slip. But now I was more aware, more in control of the situation. Or so I thought. This time it wasn't just about excitement. It wasn't about being reckless. I wasn't seeking pleasure or anything so simple. I was searching for something deeper. The first time I had fallen into it without thinking, without understanding the consequences. But now I knew exactly what I was doing, and yet the choice to do it again felt almost empowering. I convinced myself that I could walk away at any time, that I could stop when I wanted. But that was a lie. At that point, I didn't see the damage I was doing. I didn't see the cracks forming in the foundation of my marriage. I thought I had it under control, this thing that was growing between me and the secret I was keeping. I could still smile at my husband, hold his hand, pretend everything was the same. On the outside, nothing had changed, but inside I was losing my grip. It wasn't like I was running from something in my marriage. I wasn't seeking attention or affection that I wasn't getting. My husband was kind, loving, and thoughtful, but there was a void in me, something I couldn't explain, and I filled it with the only thing I could find. This secret became my escape, my moment of relief when the world felt like too much to carry. I couldn't stop myself. Every time I crossed that line, I felt more powerful, like I was controlling my own destiny. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. I was falling into something I couldn't control, and each time I did it, it felt harder to stop. The worst part was that I felt a strange comfort in it. The secret wasn't just a burden anymore, it was part of me, and that terrified me. How had something so small, something so seemingly harmless, become such an integral part of my life? It was like I had built a wall around myself, a wall made of lies and justifications, and with every step I added another brick. I kept telling myself that I wouldn't let it go any further, that I wouldn't let it change me. But that wasn't the truth. It was changing me, and I couldn't stop it. And worse yet, I couldn't even imagine how to turn back. Each time I looked at my husband, I felt a pang of guilt. The more I crossed that line, the more I realized how much I was risking. But I couldn't bring myself to tell him. I couldn't face the truth. The fear of what would happen if he found out held me in place, like I was frozen, unable to move forward or backward. I had crossed the line twice now, and each time it got harder to keep the secret. But I still didn't stop, and that was the beginning of a deeper struggle that I didn't know how to escape. By the third time, things had started to feel suffocating. What was once something I could justify to myself, something that seemed harmless, was now a burden that weighed on me with every breath I took. It wasn't just the act anymore, it was the lies, the secrecy, the constant growing pressure of knowing I was hiding something so big, something so important from the person who trusted me the most. The guilt started to eat away at me. Each time I looked at my husband, I felt like I was drowning. How could I look at him, smile, laugh, share intimate moments knowing that I was carrying around this secret? The facade was getting harder to maintain. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when deep down I was terrified of getting caught. It wasn't just about the physical act anymore, it was the emotional toll it was taking on me. Each time I crossed that line, the guilt didn't fade. It built up. I started to feel disconnected, like I was living two lives. One was the life I showed everyone, the perfect wife, the loving partner, and the other was this dark, hidden world that no one could know about. I felt like I was playing a part in my own life, and the longer I kept the secret, the more distant I became from the person I used to be. I couldn't even look at myself the same way anymore. The person in the mirror wasn't someone I recognized. I was someone who had started to lose their integrity, their sense of self. I felt ashamed. I started questioning everything. How had I allowed myself to go this far? What had happened to the person I was before all of this? Was I even capable of turning back? Or had I already gone too far? But still, I didn't stop. With every lie, with every moment of silence between us, I felt more trapped. I would tell myself it was the last time, that I would stop before it got out of hand. But every time it happened again. The guilt was always there, hovering over me, but somehow it wasn't enough to make me walk away from the situation. There were moments when I thought about telling him. I'd imagine the conversation, how I would sit him down, how I would apologize. But when the time came, I couldn't bring myself to do it. The fear of losing everything, my marriage, my life, the trust we had, was paralyzing. I was afraid of what would happen if he knew. Would he leave me? Would he look at me differently? I didn't know if I could handle the answer. And so I stayed silent. I kept up the lies. I told myself it would be okay. But with each passing day, I could feel myself breaking under the pressure. I was losing pieces of myself and it scared me. But the fear of confessing was greater than the fear of continuing the lie. I had crossed the line 3 times now. Each time it felt harder to walk back. The weight of my secret was getting heavier and I didn't know how much longer I could carry it. But I didn't stop. And that in itself was the most terrifying part of all. By the 4th time, I wasn't just crossing a line. I was sinking deeper into a place I didn't recognize. The lies had become a part of me, woven into the fabric of my daily life. I wasn't even pretending to be someone I wasn't anymore. I had become someone who justified things that once would have felt completely wrong. It wasn't the same as before. The excitement, the thrill, that feeling of control, it was gone. It wasn't even about pleasure anymore. It wasn't about feeling powerful or in charge. By this point, I had crossed the line so many times that I was numb to the excitement. But the emptiness I felt inside had only grown stronger, and I didn't know how to fill it. I began to feel invisible in my own life. Everything around me seemed like it was moving forward. My husband, my friends, the world outside. But I felt stuck. There were moments when I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back. I was a stranger to myself, disconnected from who I used to be. The truth is, I was craving attention. I was craving validation. I needed someone to see me. I needed someone to notice me, to tell me I mattered. But I didn't know how to ask for that from my husband. He was a good man. He loved me, but he was busy. We were both so wrapped up in our own lives that I started to feel like I was fading into the background. It wasn't his fault. It wasn't even about him. It was about me, about my own need for reassurance that I still existed, that I was still someone worthy of love and attention. I didn't know how to talk to him about it. I didn't know how to ask for more without feeling guilty, like I was demanding something that wasn't fair to ask for. So I did what I always did when I felt overwhelmed. I kept it inside. I told myself that I could handle it, but I couldn't. And that's when the 4th time happened. It wasn't about seeking revenge or proving something. It wasn't even about my husband. It was about me and the desperate need I had for validation. I wanted someone to tell me I was enough. I wanted someone to make me feel seen again. The moment I crossed the line, I felt a brief moment of relief. It was like a temporary fix to a deeper problem, but it didn't last. It never lasted. It only made me feel emptier. The brief satisfaction quickly turned into guilt, shame, and regret. But the need for validation didn't go away. In fact, it grew stronger. What I failed to realize was that the validation I was seeking wasn't coming from the right place. I was looking for it outside of myself instead of within. I was looking for external reassurance because I didn't know how to find peace within myself. I didn't know how to love and accept myself as I was, flaws and all. Every time I crossed the line, it became clearer that I wasn't just hiding a secret from my husband. I was hiding from myself. I was avoiding the truth about my own insecurities, my own fears. I didn't want to face the fact that I wasn't feeling fulfilled, not because of my marriage, but because of my own emotional void. But still, I didn't stop. I couldn't. The fear of facing myself, of admitting how lost I felt, was greater than the fear of the consequences. I was desperate to fill a void that no one else could fill but me. And so I kept going. The line kept moving further away, and I couldn't find the strength to pull myself back. By the time the 5th time came, I knew I had crossed a point of no return. What had started as a series of small mistakes, almost like innocent missteps, had turned into something much bigger than I ever intended. It wasn't just about the act anymore. It was about the lie that had consumed me. It was about the distance between the person I used to be and the person I had become. And most painfully, it was about the realization that I had hurt the one person who trusted me the most. I had crossed the line so many times that it felt like there was no coming back. Each time, the guilt grew heavier, the shame more unbearable. I felt suffocated by the weight of the secret I was carrying. But still, I couldn't find the strength to tell him. I couldn't bring myself to admit what I had done. The fear of losing him, the fear of facing the truth, kept me paralyzed. The fifth time wasn't just another mistake. It was a moment of reckoning. I knew that if I didn't stop now, I would lose everything. I would lose my marriage, my integrity, and the trust that we had built together. But in that moment, the fear of facing the consequences seemed worse than the fear of continuing the lie. I felt trapped in a cycle I didn't know how to break. Looking at my husband, I could see the love in his eyes. He had no idea. He had no clue about the darkness I had been hiding, about the secrets I had been keeping from him. And that made everything worse. Every time I looked at him, I felt like I was lying not just to him, but to myself. How could I look at him and pretend everything was okay when inside I was falling apart? I realized I had been running away from the truth for so long. I had tried to fill the emptiness inside with things that didn't matter, with temporary distractions that never gave me what I needed. The truth was, I wasn't just hiding from my husband, I was hiding from myself. I didn't want to face the parts of me that felt broken, insecure, and lost. So, I kept making excuses, kept pretending everything was fine, kept crossing that line because it was easier than dealing with the pain that came with facing the truth. But as the days passed, I knew something had to change. I couldn't keep living this way. I couldn't keep pretending. I had to face what I had done, and I had to decide whether I was ready to take responsibility for it or lose everything I had built. I knew that telling him would be the hardest thing I'd ever do, but it was also the only way to start healing. I had to come clean. I had to break the silence. And so I made a decision. I would tell him the truth. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be painless. But it was the only way to stop this cycle and find the redemption I so desperately needed. I don't know what will happen next. I don't know if he'll forgive me or if he'll even want to stay with me. But I know one thing, I can't keep living a lie. It's time to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Because in the end, the truth is the only thing that will set me. If you've ever faced a moment of truth where you had to make a life-changing decision, leave a comment and share your story. You're not alone.